So Banishers Ghost of New Eden is arguably the most slept on game I've ever played, and one of the best parts of the game is making really fun builds. I've already made a few builds for red, but today we're going to be making a very fun, highly mobile punch build for Antea. You have really high sustain, really high damage, and the longer that you're in spirit form and attacking, you get more and more damage. This is my Spirit Striker build for Banishers Ghost of New Eden. Let me show you how I build it. Now before we dive on in guys, I just want to thank everyone for all the love and support on the previous videos for Banishers. Of course the game is, in my opinion, one of the most slept on games I've played in the entire year or ever. It's a really fun game, but with that in mind, we are getting close to the end of the life cycle of the game. If you enjoyed the content that you saw here today or in any of my previous videos, just know I'm going to be keeping that for a lot of upcoming games that you're probably going to be playing. So do consider subscribing or continue to say subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And yeah, let's dive on into the build. So starting off with our chest, we have the Blessed Garbed, and stats that we're ideally looking for is persistence as well as wisdom and sometimes wrath. I don't love it, but sometimes wrath. And the reason we're using the Blessed Garb is every melee attack and punch attack has 10% increased damage for every manifestation on cooldown. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, we can easily sustain having a very high cooldown. And so yeah, we're using the Blessed Garb for that. Moving on, we have the Silver Executioners. And we have hitting an enemy with heavy attacks increases the damage of the next punch attack by 200%. We're not going to be using that much. That's kind of negligible. Most importantly, it has wisdom and persistence once again on it. So functionally, it's basically a stat stick, right? Moving on to the Star Cluster, and this is our rifle. This is the only one I don't love. I'm sure there's better rifles. I only have like half of them. So if you know of a rifle that is a little bit better, let me know down in the comments where you found it. But this is the best we have. Defeating an enemy with the next rifle attack increases the damage of manifestations by 70%. We're not a manifestation build, so yeah, kind of useless, but let me know down in the comments something better. Next we have Ethereal Haste, and while this one has Wrath on it, it's actually pretty decent for the build. And what this does is damage dealt to red and Antea is increased by 50% when all manifestations are on cooldown, so that's a massive buff. And if we have a lot of cooldown, this is going to make it much easier to sustain. Alternatively, you can go with, I believe, Essential Liqueur. And this one gives Wisdom, Wrath, and Persistence. And it'll give you 6 points of Spirit points every time you hit on your third attack with your punch. I don't think this is that needed. Like, you have pretty good sustain in this build. It does give you flat more Wisdom. But in terms of like raw damage, I'm pretty sure that Ethereal Haste is going to be better for you. Moving on, we have the True Love Knot, and this one is going to increase Antea's damage by 50%, but it's going to make red takes 25% more damage. It's just a straight up damage increase for Antea. It's really nice. Again, it has Wisdom, Wrath, and Persistence, really good stats that you need. But yeah, that's going to be the Bane Ring. Moving on, making its another reappearance, Red Goddess. This one's just really good. It's one of the best build enabling items in the entire game in my opinion. And manifestation damage is increased by 100%. We don't care about that. But cooldowns are also increased by 100%, which is what we care about the most. Again, it has vitality and persistence, which persistence is still good. This is just a good like stat stick for really good HP for both of your characters, but also is going to just maintain this buff, and it's going to help maintain this buff much easier. Moving on to the wristband, we have the Savage River. Punch attack is increased by 50%, but spirit cost of the punch is increased by 50% as well. And again, it's going to have persistence and punch damage on it, which again, we're stacking a lot of persistence. That looks like it's a big drain on your punch attack, but it's not. You'll be able to sustain it with a few other things we're going to talk about in this build. But Savage River is really good for the build. I would highly recommend it. Finally, we have Summon Whistle. I think that's how it's pronounced. And this is going to give you wisdom and persistence. Once again, really good stats. And defeating an enemy with punch attack restores 20 health points, or spirit points rather. And this is going to be one of your major sustainers. In the example you're going to see at the end of the video, which I probably should have mentioned in the intro, just keep in mind that that's like 10 levels above. That's a very abnormal amount of levels on the hardest of difficulties, and Spirit Sustain was relatively easy with just this item in the build. So you're never going to really need Spirit that much because the build is very self-sustaining, because you have a massive Spirit pool of 530. That's pretty much it for the equipment. Let's move on to the evolutions. So we're on the evolution tree and we're going to be getting Pocket of Holding. This is going to increase our decoration charges. We want this because sometimes we need to use our heal to get our health up. Again, you're only going to need that in the super high abnormal stuff that most players won't be doing. And this will just help Antea to just come out because sometimes you make mistakes, you're human. So I would use Pocket of Holding. We're using Powder Keg, so we're just building red as heavy. Hitting, again, we're using like similar to our heavy build, we're just going to build them kind of like that. Invigorate, and then you're going to get resilience to give him some health, but these are not that important. Moving on to leap, we're going to be getting heavy artillery and then barrier. Again, not that important, but we're going to get relentless spirit, and this one's actually pretty big. Each enemy hit by punch attack increases the damage of punch by 7%, and this effect can accumulate, meaning you're going to keep attacking and you're going to keep getting more and more damage on your punch. But here's the thing, it only resets after a switch, so if you get hit, it doesn't matter. What matters is switching, so you're going to try not to be on red as much as possible. You're going to try to stay on Antea, and you're going to have a ton of health. You're going to have potions, you're going to have things that like sustain you, so you're going to really start stacking damage. Eventually, technically, eventually you will be able to kill anything in the game, because then you'll get eventually enough damage if you keep hitting it. With that in mind, you're going to do a lot of damage regardless, but yeah, just let you know, you have a really great way of infinite damage stacking. Moving on, we have Initiator, just basically to pass the Spectral Ignition. And Spectral Ignition is going to do a lot of AoE damage. This really helps you with AoE because she does lack a little bit of AoE with the build because you don't have your manifestations. But this will be more than enough to just like AoE any and everything down. Moving on to the Outburst Tree, and we're going to be getting Kiss of Death. Defeating an enemy with red restores health, and defeating enemy with Antea restores spirit. This is going to be 10 plus the 20 you get for your ring, giving you 30 spirit points regeneration whenever you kill. And this is why you never run out of spirit, because you just have a lot of spirit coming in from a lot of other things. This is all you really need for sustain, and then we get draining barrier because like we have nothing else to get here, so you can get that. Over here we have banishing shot. Do not get this one. Tandem is going to reduce the spirit, like the cooldown of your manifestations. You don't want that, you want to increase them. So that's why we get the banishing shot, but we're not going to really be using that. And then we have tormented spirit. Damage dealt by Antea is increased by 25, but she takes more damage. We don't care about that because we want damage in your ghost. You can like move around, it's whatever. For both of these trees, there's nothing really that important. We do have some banishing stuff, that's why I'm taking this, but you don't really need it. Over here, Deep Outburst is fine, I guess, but you do not want to take any of these down here because they don't really do anything for you. And this one is not good because this one is going to give your manifestation cooldowns whenever you shoot with your rifle. So again, don't really need much from this area. Moving on to the Ensnare Tree. We took reflex for some reason. We don't really need it, but I don't know, just in case you need to shoot with your rifle sometimes, because you may need to do that if the ones stand on top of like the obstacles. Swapping to him is going to be needed. It just helps you with damage. Over here we have transfer. Spirit point gains are increased by 30% as well, but red loses 30% of his health, and this is going to make that 30% that you get a little bit more effective. And then we're going to get useful remains, because this one is one of the best evolutions in the entire game. It gives you 2 decorations, but you lose 30% cooldown, which again, we're a cooldown, like on cooldown build, so it works really well. Useful remains is really, really good. Down here, typically I would get waiting stance, but we're going to be getting on the edge because damage dealt by Antea is increased by 30%. Red's going to take more damage, but again, we don't care about red. He has okay enough health to survive. Moving on to the last tree, and that's fusion. We're going to take salvation, and then we're going to grab death knell. We do swap a little bit sometimes, so it's not bad. This is a really good way to like swap into red into a punch, which is really nice. Over here we take patient. Damage taken is reduced by 15%, which is really good, but manifestation cooldowns are again increased by 30%, so it's a double whammy, giving her some defense as well as helping her sustain that cooldown. And then over here we have never ending. This one just gonna help with just banishing a little bit once again, because sometimes he does banish. Moving on over here, we take the Devil's Deal. This is going to increase our health, our spirit, and our banishing gauge. You're going to take more damage. We don't care about damage taken. We just kind of want to enable our spirit, so that's why we take this. And then I took Extended Fusion. The cost of punch attacks during fusion is reduced by 50%. We don't really need this, but it's like an extra point that has some value. You don't have to, but you know, do what you want. And then we have Last Straw. Damage dealt by Entei is increased by 15% for each manifestation on cooldown. Again, makes perfect sense to the build. And then we get Spirit Warden for the extra damage on our next manifestation. Don't really need it, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. Just make sure you don't do anything that increases your reduces your cooldown. We want to increase our cooldown, and that's pretty much all you need for Revolution. One thing I did want to point out as we go to the end, because at the end I'm going to have some gameplay footage of me facing off against things on hard mode. This is going to be pretty much the build that has faced off against the hardest of monsters, because every time I make one of these build videos, I complete the trial that I do. The monsters get stronger while I stay about the same, right? So just keep in mind that this is going to be 10 levels above my character on the hardest difficulty, and we beat it very decisively. So it's going to be an unrealistic expectation. Of course, I'm just doing for proof of concept, but this is never going to be a situation where most players play. But again, it's very strong, and I hope you guys like it. With that said, if you guys do have any more build requests, consider leaving it down in the comments and I'll see if I can get it done. But just keep in mind, I am going to be moving on to games like Helldivers, as well as Dragon's Dogma 2 and Rise of the Ronin. So expect to see those on the channel in the near future. Have a good evening, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.
No step from the shadows. Reinforcements! There's more of. More fun. Get back up.
This feels good.